back-to-back cleanup today, so I kind of like that because they were the champs of the All-American Girls League in 1944, the second year of the league. And the picture, oh, you're set up? Okay, now we're good. All right, this picture is a late season picture of the Chicks right before they went to the championship series, and the picture is courtesy of this lady right up here. That would be Sylvia Ronsky. She was one of the two Milwaukee natives on the Chicks team, and I was fortunate enough to get to meet and interview her actually about 20 years ago right now, and she was kind enough to give me some of these great pictures that are pretty much one-of-a-kind pictures. Milwaukee Chicks. Only year in the league, 1944, they won the championship, and we'll definitely get into a whole lot about how that all went about with the Chicks. Raise your hand if you have seen the movie A League of Their Own. Maybe better yet, raise your hand if you haven't seen it. Okay. So obviously...
Is that crying in baseball? That's my question.
Not in the All-American Girls League, there was no crying. Not about that. Part of what I really liked about the movie was, obviously, like Earl said with 42, you know, there's an awful lot of historical accuracy. Yes, the ladies did say that there were some things that were just not quite right, and especially with the whole Tom Hanks role. But as far as the historical reality of the movie, you know, the teams and the way that the league all came about, pretty accurate. I really like the fact that a song by Carole King, Now and Forever, was a part of the movie, and I'll see if we can just play a short piece of that. We'll see Rick if the microphone and my computer work. Good enough. Anyways, wasn't sure how that would work, but we thought we'd give it a try. But anyways, Carole King actually got a Grammy Award nomination for writing that song, and every time I hear it, we actually play this every year. The whole movie we play with our Menominee Falls Fast Pitch program, and I still get choked up, so I guess there is still crying in baseball, and our ball players in Menominee Falls know that I'll get choked up every time I see the movie and every time I hear that song. So we are going to break this down into three different sections. First of all, why the All-American Girls League came to Milwaukee, why it only lasted for 1 year, and talk a little bit about the ball players later on. We actually have a reenactment player here, Mary Shea, who brought along, I didn't know she was going to be here, I met her until today, but she brought along her hat, her reenactment jersey, so we'll show all that off later on. But we'll break it down into three sections: how the Chicks were built, how they came to Milwaukee, then we'll talk a little bit about their attendance issues and why they left for Grand Rapids, and then we'll talk about their 17 ball players, our Hall of Fame manager, and probably the best chaperone in the history of the league. So the Chicks were in Milwaukee, we're the first world champions in Milwaukee. I'm sure most everybody here, these Milwaukee Ken Kellner people, can probably tell us who the other two Milwaukee world champions are. Bob, you would know one.
You would know that.
1957 Milwaukee.
Yep, 1957 Braves, and who's the other world champion?
$71.
$71, exactly. But the Chicks were first, so too bad Bucks and Braves. Okay, so we'll start right in on to why the league, how the league got started. Jumped ahead a little bit, but the league started in '43. It started in the four small industrial towns of Kenosha, Rockford, South Bend, and Kenosha. And Kenosha actually plays a pretty big role in this whole presentation, and as you'll see later on. But Philip Wrigley, who owned the Cubs, decided that with the fact that a lot of the ball players were being sent overseas and minor leagues were shutting down, that he wanted, he's pictured there in the middle, that we needed to have another version of baseball, and he opened up the league in four smaller industrial towns in the Midwest. And things went so well that by 1944, he decided, hey, now let's go to the big cities. Let's go to Minneapolis, let's go to Milwaukee. And the team named Chicks, we'll talk about that later. That was a controversial topic. And then, of course, the Minneapolis Millerettes was a takeoff on the American Association team name of Minneapolis Millers. Lasted 1 year for the Miller. In fact, the Millerettes didn't even last for 1 year. They ended up playing the season out on the road, ended up moving to Fort Wayne, where they became the Daisies. And the Chicks played some home games also in other locations besides Orchard Field. Color picture of Orchard Field on the bottom, and then an early season picture of the Chicks up on top. Again, those pictures are courtesy of Sylvia Ronsky. And the Chicks' home ballpark was Orchard Field, and that was one of the problems that actually the Chicks had as to why things didn't really fly in Milwaukee. Season started out for the ball players by having tryouts in Peru, Illinois, and all the players tried out there, and they were allocated to the teams. So that very similar to the way the movie League of Their Own depicted the tryouts. The players were assigned by contract to the league, and then would end up going to one of the franchises. And there was some movement during the course of the year, which I'll explain to you here in a few minutes. As you can see, Peru's in kind of a central location, and then the managers decided which players would make the league, and then they tried to disperse the players as evenly as possible. A lot of the 43 Peaches played on the 44 Peaches, same thing with Kenosha, Racine, and South Bend, so there was some continuity. May 27th, Orchard Field. That was opening day for the Chicks. They played on a Saturday afternoon in front of only 631 fans. So not a great start. They also lost their first 3 games against the South Bend Blue Sox, and luckily they pulled out the final game of the series. There we go. Lower left, we have 4 of the Chicks at Orchard Field. For those of you that are familiar with Orchard Field, you recognize the old wood grandstands and some of the other features. Mayor John Bone actually threw out the first pitch on opening day. And the ad that you see on the right-hand side there, that is from the Milwaukee Journal 2 days before opening day. You can see the picture of the ball player. You can see the schedule as the season was getting ready to go here in Milwaukee. 2,300 fans all weekend. That was it. And that was part of the problem. That even right off the bat, the Chicks just didn't get a lot of attention in Milwaukee. They went to Rockford for Memorial Day, and they split a doubleheader with the Peaches at Fire Stadium. That doubleheader drew 4,300 people. So as you can see right away, the Chicks were not very popular at home, but in the other towns of Kenosha, Racine, South Bend, and Rockford, that the attendance was much higher. So we had some problems here early on in the season. You can see the lady in the cast. That's Dolores Klazowski. She was the first Chicks first baseman. She broke her leg. She still got the team picture. Kind of nice. Connie Wisniewski, the #1 pitcher. She twisted her knee, kept her out for a while. And then Vivian Anderson, Milwaukee born and raised third baseman. She broke 2 fingers early in the season, almost to the point where they had to be amputated. And when I was able to interview her, you could see it still had a lot of bend to her fingers after all those years, but she was able to continue playing ball later in the season and further on in 1945 and 46. So what happened is that the league was able to bring some reinforcements in, which, as you can see, the Chicks needed. They were only 10-16 to start the season off. So what they did is they brought in Vicki Panos, who's pictured on the right side. You can see she looks rather confident as she's coming into the Chicks. And she had started out the season with South Bend. Then they brought, believe it or not, another Merle. How about that? Big day for Merles here. But Merle Pat-Cagle was brought in. She was a rookie, very fast, very, very heavy hitter in terms of home runs. And there weren't a lot of home runs hit in the league, but she was one of the few ladies that could do that really well. And then they also brought in the 1943 All-American Girls League batting champion, Gladys Carey Davis. She came in from the Rockford Peaches, so the Chicks received a lot of reinforcements. They also brought in Watertown native Doris Tetzloff to take over at third base for Vivian Anderson. Pitching and speed league, not a lot of home runs, so we brought in players that fit the bill just right for the Chicks, and it made a big difference as the season went on. Chicks pitching staff. There's one picture of the 5 starting pitchers with manager Max Carey, Hall of Famer Max Carey. This picture I like even better. Max Carey starting then with our shortest pitcher to our tallest pitcher, Sylvia Ronsky, again the lady who took care of those pictures for me, and then going all the way to the back with Connie Wisniewski. 5'2" Sylvia Ronsky up to 5'10" Connie Wisniewski, and 3 right-hand pitchers. I shouldn't say right hand, the lefty in the middle, Viola Thompson, and then Joe Kabek and Connie Wisniewski. They did most of the pitching later in the season and they were the only 3 pitchers that actually pitched at all in the championship series later on. All right, so first half of the season ends, and coincidentally, we're here in Kenosha, and the Kenosha Comets did win the first half championship. The Chicks got better in the first half of the season. They ended up 30-26 and ended up 3rd. And just as we have in the minor leagues still, the Comets, by virtue of winning the first half of the season, ended up going to the championship series. And that clip, or that newspaper clip that you see right there, that is from July 17th, about halfway through the season. So things just got nothing but better for the Chicks. Their second half record, 40-19. Now that we had all these good ball players, Connie Wisniewski was healthy, pitching very well again. League overall best record of 70-45. 11-game winning streak, which took them to a 29-11 record. They were 5.5 games up, and they closed the season on September 6th against the Minneapolis Miller-Reds, who by then were being called the Orphans. And that last game of the season was not even played in Milwaukee. It was played in Oshkosh, as Wrigley and the league were trying to find places where the Chicks would draw better. And actually the Chicks never played at Orchard Field again, as you'll see on the next slide. So all 7 championship games were played at Lakefront Stadium. I know we still have Simmons Field here in Kenosha, but at the early stages of the All-American Girl League stretch in Kenosha, it was played at Lakefront Stadium. The color picture I kind of like. I think it's kind of a nice depiction of the stadium that I don't think that anybody here probably has ever been. Is anybody here from Kenosha? And you're at Lakefront Stadium?
Yes.
Okay. Was it more of a football field?
It was more of a football field and a track, a cinder track.
Okay. So they kind of built the softball diamond into it for the early seasons of the Comets. But the problem was the Milwaukee Brewers had Orchard Field sewn up for their playoffs. The Brewers were very good that year, and the Brewers were the landlords, and the Chicks were the tenants. And to be honest with you, the ball players on the Chicks really weren't that concerned about it. Bigger crowds in Kenosha, more enthusiasm. If Milwaukee fans wanted to come down to Kenosha, they could. At that point, however, and that's a picture of the Comets there in the lower right, the Comets had a lot of injuries, so in a way, having the home field advantage kind of leveled things out a little bit and made for a very tight 7-game series. And again, the Chicks didn't really mind going to Kenosha. It was a little more exciting venue. And the Chicks did win the 7-game series. Connie Wisniewski, who was called Iron Woman, was the one that pretty much took command, and she ended up pitching games 6 and 7. Joe Kabeck and Viola Thompson both got lit up pretty badly in Game 5. They gave up 9 runs to the Comets in Game 5, and the Comets were up 3-2. In Game 6, it was scoreless until the 11th inning, and then Merle Cagle made an error. The Comets took a 1-0 lead. Bottom of the 11th, Cagle made up for it. She scored the tying run. The Chicks got the winning run. Went on to Game 7, and Connie Wisniewski threw a shutout in Game 7. She pitched 46 innings in the whole series, and the way she described it, she said, "I pitched with my whole body, not just my arm." And for any of you that have coached softball or know much about fast pitch softball, you can see, she definitely has awful good form for back in 1944. The league was an underhand fast pitch league that year. I believe a 12-inch ball from talking with Mary and Jackie over here before. It eventually became overhand, so in that regard, a league of their own was off a little bit, but not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. So anyways, the Chicks won. They were the champs. And just interesting to note the difference in coverage. Right-hand side, where the red is, that's all the Milwaukee Journal could say about the champion Chicks. Just a tiny little cut in the paper. If you look at what the Kenosha Evening News did, even though the Comets lost, pretty much a full page the following day in their newspaper. So for some reason, the Milwaukee press just never really latched on to the Chicks, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Yes?
Why does Milwaukee paper keep referring to them as the Schnitz?
Yeah, good question, Dennis. We're gonna cover that. That was one of the issues that the Chicks had, and actually there were actually warnings in Chicks and Schnitz, but all the way to the end, the Journal insisted upon calling them the Schnitz, and that was an issue. It had something to do with Phil Wrigley, and we'll talk about that. Yes, sir.
How did the team in Minneapolis draw?
So poorly. They played, I think, Nicollet Park. Is that how you pronounce it? Up there? Okay. I know in Milwaukee, Nicollet High School is pronounced differently than Nicollet Park. Yeah, but no, they horrible draw. So they didn't play anything in Minnesota. They latter half of the season they played every game on the road. So all the other teams picked up some extra home games, and again they were called the Orphans. So it didn't last. So and there's a lot of reasons why the league didn't make it into bigger towns, and we'll start going over those. Next, good segue, Dennis. Thank you. All right, so obviously attendance was one main issue. Philip Wrigley, to a great extent, was an issue, and then there were a lot of local problems, the name being one, the press coverage being another. So we'll dive right into what some of those issues might have been. Even Orchard Field was an issue. And so now we'll just dive right in and go over some of those. So, first problem, in Milwaukee and in Minneapolis, Philip Wrigley was the only owner, whereas in the 4 small towns, there were co-owners with Wrigley. So nobody in Milwaukee was real motivated to market the team. No local vested interest, as you can see here. The 4 small towns, their teams greatly outdrew the teams in the big towns. That is Gary Marshall, Penny Marshall's brother. Okay, and obviously Penny Marshall was the director of a league of their own. And Gary Marshall was playing the role of Walter Harvey in the movie. Harvey Bars versus Wrigley Gum. I'm guessing maybe they didn't get permission from the Wrigleys to actually use the Wrigley name in the movie. But pretty similar. Harvey in the movie was shown as owning the whole league. And again, it was an issue in Milwaukee in that we just didn't have anybody with any money in it. So there just wasn't a lot of marketing going on other than those few newspaper ads and a couple of last-ditch efforts that you'll see later on that the league tried pulling off with the Chicks. So anyways, I kind of liked the Gary Marshall role. That was kind of a fun role in the movie, and how he decided to keep the league going later on after a little, prodding by David Strather playing Ira Lowenstein in the movie. So fun roles and fun stuff. All right, next big issue was Orchard Field. Okay, way too large of a stadium to have a team like the Chicks in. They're playing in the same stadium, same year as the Milwaukee Brewers, so when the Chicks were in town, they could bring everything into 68 feet. I don't know where they arrived at 68 feet. Nowadays softball is 60 feet. But it was a 40-foot distance, and so it just didn't look right on the baseball diamond, and the fans were, it wasn't the intimate setting that you would get at Lakefront Stadium. Horlick Field and Racine. Who's been to Horlick Field and Racine for anything? Football field? Yeah.